Hope everyone can hear me. Hi, my name's Mitty Lucraft. I'm a Senior Consultant at TBI Communications. It's fantastic to see so many of you here with us today. My excellent panel, who I'm going to introduce shortly, are going to be talking about data and analytics in the context of marketing for an open access and open research future. Now, this builds on a session that I chaired at SSP earlier in the year. Can I have a show of hands? Was anybody at that session? One person. Well, apologies if you hear any repeats. No, please don't. You're going to hear add-ons from that session, but for everybody else, you can say whatever you like and nobody will know. So thank you very much for joining us. What we're talking about today is what's driving the shift. A lot of publishers are seeing a shift from what has traditionally been a focus on B2B marketing, focusing on institutions, to a shift towards B2C marketing and author-centric marketing. So what's the reason for that? Well, where authors are is not necessarily just thinking about their location. It's thinking about how do you use data and analysis to understand who is working in your areas, and increasingly those researchers are working interdisciplinary. They're based all around the world. They're not necessarily your membership, and so knowing who a potential author is requires a more strategic approach. And if you think about the fact that those researchers are also doing other hats for your organisations, increasingly those publishers are talking to these researchers as peer reviewers, as potential EBMs, as EICs. So thinking about the various roles that a potential author is playing is also thinking about what stage of research those researchers are at and how else they could be interacting with you. Now, other factors that my panel are going to be talking about today are not just thinking about data in terms of identifying authors, but also how to communicate effectively with those authors. So one facet of that is the fact that there's a lot more competition for authors across publishers. If you think about when 2014, the Directory of Open Access Journal listed about 10,000 journals, that's double that this year. It's close to 20,000 open access journals. So there's a lot more choice for researchers. So thinking about what's motivating your authors of where to publish, thinking about their behaviours, what would encourage them to publish with you is a big topic. We're also going to be looking at how we can understand where researchers are in terms of perceptions and insights. So we're not just talking about data in terms of the technology and MarTech stack. We're talking about all the ways that you're using and gathering data about your communities to inform your marketing. So we're going to cover three topics today. Firstly, we're going to be talking about strategic drivers that are impacting the changes needed in marketing, particularly identifying the market for open access, community needs. We're then going to move on to talking about how to prioritise the available data from a variety of angles. And then lastly, I've asked the panel to share how they're employing these tools and techniques and what kind of impact that's having on teams. So first of all, I'd very much like to welcome Sarah from the IET, Matt Astel from, Sarah Killingworth, beg your pardon, from IET, Matthias Astel from ResearchGate, and Rachel Harper from IOPP, who are going to give us our first look at what does the transition to open access mean for marketing teams in terms of author and submission marketing strategy. So Matt, I'm going to come to you first.
Thank you, Mitty. Yeah, as Mitty said, I'm currently at ResearchGate. Part of my role is working on the products and partnerships that we're building for publishers. For the 10 years prior to that, though, I worked across a range of different academic publishers, commercial publishers, society publishers, and fully open access publishers in marketing and publishing roles. And I think for the transition to, as Mitty alluded to in the intro, the transition to OA requires more than simply looking at researchers as authors, but really a fully researcher-centric approach, understanding all the different ways in which they're interacting with your journal as readers, as authors, as editors, as reviewers, and building a picture of that individual and all the different points at which they're interacting with your journal. That's not a straightforward thing to do. It takes a lot of different data points and ability to understand the different ways in which researchers are interacting with your journal in those different roles and bring those together into a holistic understanding of that researcher. I think in terms of authorship specifically, though, there is a way in which you can build that understanding in a more straightforward manner. And that is by starting with the focus on previous authors. You already know who those authors are. They are already aware of your journal and engaging with it. They have successfully passed peer review. And so they're a really solid, reliable group to start to build an understanding of all of the ways in which they're interacting with your journal. And then, based on that understanding, across the different touch points and engagements that they have, providing them with messaging, communications, to really keep the journal top of mind at all the times that they're interacting. The benefit there is that then, as you take those previous authors and move them into returning authors, they will naturally bring new authors with you as part of that re-engagement with your journal. And you can then build the same models of developing understanding and engagement for those new authors, return those, bring more new authors in there as co-authors in their future papers. And so then you can start from a reliable base of people that you know, grow an understanding of them, have them engage and bring new authors to you, and continuously grow your journals in that way.
Fantastic. Thanks, Matt. I'm going to ask Rachel to pick up.
So building on Matt's point about that understanding of customer insights is really valuable, and there's no doubt about it. And we're very fortunate as publishers that we have this goldmine of data available to us. One of the things that we've tried to do at IP Publishing is also take a slightly different approach as well with market research. And we found that complements that customer insight really well. It gives you that added layer of perspective. It gives you that broader industry trends, what's happening, what are the barriers, what are the challenges that your authors and researchers and the scientific community is facing. And in an OA world, that's incredibly valuable. So we carried out a big piece of global research about a year ago on OA market perceptions across the world. And we found that gave us a huge amount of valuable information on the barriers that researchers were facing when it came to publishing OA, the challenges that they're facing, access to funding, and then we could split that down by geography and see, where specific demographics were facing those challenges. We found that then we can build that and add that, and it really complements the customer insight that we get from all the points that Matt was making earlier. So market research might be seen as a bit of a sort of traditional tool. It's really reliable in terms of building that data, and it gives you that broader perspective. So it's from us in an OA world, we found that it really, really helps to complement that customer insight.
Thanks, Rachel. Sarah.
So hi everyone, I'm Sarah Killingworth, the Head of Marketing at the IET. So my team look after customer experience, data and insight, market research, strategic marketing and marketing operations. And the reason I tell you about that is because what we've found is that to get behind the sort of shift in how publishing is now moving to an open access world and an open science world, we've had to look at what our marketing team does and how it's structured to support that. So kind of going back a couple of years, you may know that the IET flipped its entire journals programme to open access. And we did that through a partnership with Wiley. But what that meant is while Wiley took on the actual kind of submissions marketing and did everything from APCs and waivers and working with various programs to support collection of APCs, from the IET's perspective, we really had to look at what we were doing across all of the research solutions that we offer, because of course journals is just one part of it. We do books, we do databases, we do scholarships, all kinds of things. So what that meant for us really was kind of taking the opportunity to really shape our team and better align what we wanted to do to try and drive that engagement and really help to support all of the solutions that we had. So building on what Rachel just said and also what Matt has said around the whole customer piece and the insight piece, that was absolutely key, because to be as effective as possible in our new approach, we needed to really understand everything we possibly could about our authors, their workflows, the barriers, the pain points, and really start to map that together with the sort of tools and solutions that we had to try and understand what we really were kind of dealing with in terms of that entire ecosystem around how that works. So like Rachel, we did some research. We looked at what researchers were doing and what authors were doing. all the way through that process. And then using that insight, we started to plot out what a typical research workflow looked like. And then we began to use that to identify opportunities to say at which point we could start to engage them with the different solutions that we had. So that's everything from identifying the research topic, conducting the literature review, finding collaborators, funding, right the way through to the publication itself, and then equally to the impact and assessing what work has actually impacted in the market. So all the way through that, what we were trying to aim was that for each step of the way that we were there to help them along that particular journey. And then what we did there was really look at the appropriate messaging that we needed to serve up at the right time and in the right place to try and help them kind of get access to the tools that they needed to help them. So I talked about the marketing team. That did change the way we operated as a marketing function. We were very much product focused, which possibly quite a lot of your departments might be at the moment. And we wanted to move more towards a whole solutions approach and really starting to bring in those new skill sets that were required, such as data analysis, as well as digital marketing, and really try and use that information and mine that information to understand what institutions and researchers were doing and when, to try and understand at what point we could start to serve up the right message and therefore increase our brand awareness and engagement with the market. So that's what we've been doing. And then working with Wiley, it's been very much a kind of partnership where we sort of co-market together. So there'll be initiatives that we do together, such as campaigns or surveys, and really start to drive and leverage each other's channels so that we can maximise that reach for our kind of mutual benefit. So that's where we've been sort of changing our focus.
Thank you. So some very, very, very different perspectives on this, but I think that what we can hear is there's a range of ways to tackle what is a big challenge here in terms of what's available. So as Sarah's mentioned, for some organisations, that's one marketing team covering a lot of ground, or in large organisations you may have multiple marketing teams who are coming at this in very different ways, having teams dedicated to tech data and technology. So what you can see on the chart here is a summary of feedback that we had at the SSP education session, asking what approaches to using data and insights teams were using, and it ranged right from none at all, which was very, very small, to teams who were really digging into all of these areas. You can see there's a broad distribution here. So teams using market insights, using their MarTech stack to start to gather a holistic view of who their authors were, and many other routes to doing this. So what I'm going to ask each of the panel to talk about now is, what approaches would you prioritise to adapt to meet these new changing needs? So I'm going to go to Rachel first.
So I'm going to rewind a little bit because there's a plethora of options out there when it comes to the tools and techniques available. There's lots of different customer data platforms, and it's really important that they interoperate with all the systems, the email platforms that you've got in place and so on. But none of that really matters if your data quality isn't there. So you've got to go right back to the beginning and look at how you're collecting that data and how important it is to you. So zero-party data, for example, is where a customer has proactively given you that data and they have agreed that you can use it. And so that's the most valuable data. You know that it's of a really high quality, you know that it's consistent and that it's right. And so from that perspective, we want to make sure that we are getting that data and that people are happy to give it to us. Now, that's a big challenge. Collecting data is half the battle, and collecting high quality data is the other half. So, you know, you've got to make sure that you're giving something that's valuable to them, that they have the content that gives them something that's useful to them, that helps them do their job. And so that's where our focus is, in making sure that we've got that really high quality data. And then that helps to inform the tools and techniques. You know, where do you go from there? What is it that you're looking for? But you can't start anywhere until you've made sure that your data is consistent, that you've gathered what you need. So there's no point in gathering, for example, birthdays if it's not going to be any use to you. And you've got to make sure that, you know, different data sources have got the same information. And then you can start to think about, okay, well, what's going to help me? What customer data platform is going to help me give me that unified customer view?
Super, thank you. I'm going to come to Sarah next.
Yeah, so I think as marketers, we've become used to using lots of different tools, email systems, social media systems, all kinds of things out there. But I think now the key that we're certainly finding is to sort of understand how to use that MarTech and the new MarTech that's available, like customer data platforms, to really sort of harness what you're doing in the most effective way to kind of deliver the right message to the right customer at the right time. And it's really all about that timing piece as well. So we're seeing, certainly from our point of view, and I would imagine within your organisations as well, that you're starting to look at and invest in maybe data sources, you're starting to look at kind of technology, looking at the different channels that you can leverage to really sort of drive your objectives. But sort of going back to Rachel's point, a piece about the whole data piece, really achieving success requires that deep understanding of the customer, of the author, their behaviours, their needs and their wants, and then kind of using that as the foundation to build the good data, really, which sounds really, really easy, but of course it's not, we know. And like many organisations, you know, you'll have a lot of information on your authors across multiple different systems. We certainly did. We're doing a project at the moment where we're looking at bringing all of that together. But really leveraging that effectively, you need to bring it into a single place, really, and have a single customer profile view, which kind of captures everything you already know about them and equally identifies the gaps and things that you really need to plug to try and kind of enhance that data. And that can be everything from sort of basic information such as, you know, the name of the author and the institution and an email address, very, very basic, right the way through to kind of more behavioural information such as, you know, when did they last publish, in which journal did they publish, who did they collaborate with on that particular occasion, where did they get their funding from, what channels they might use, all of that sort of information, and then trying to kind of bring that together so that when you start to interrogate, you can almost start to build author segments and then try to predict where the different authors might be in their particular publication journey. And then at that point, you go back to your MarTech stack and start to say, right, okay, well, how can I deliver the right message or create the right message, then deliver it at the most effective timing so that it reaches them at the right place and the right time, and then really start to kind of use that author journey to really maximise your impact. And then the sort of the end of that would be, of course, looking at how you can kind of track that engagement so that you can start to measure your impact beyond that. So it's a real kind of, the data is key, and having good data is absolutely foundational to that as well.
Yeah, as you say, being able to evaluate that data.
Evaluation, absolutely essential. Yeah.
Matt?
Yeah, essentially building on, as Rachel and Sarah both said, the data foundation is key, and really understanding who your researchers are, the different roles that they're playing, the ways that they're interacting, and being able to then leverage that is really the way in which you're going to provide the best experience for authors, the best experience for researchers across their different roles. The experience that a researcher has as a reader or as an editor or as a reviewer also plays into their perception of the journal as a place in which to author. And so if and when you have that data infrastructure in place and can understand the different ways in which those researchers are interacting, then providing messaging that is, and engagements that are relevant to those different interactions is key. And there's tools that, as both Rachel and Sarah have alluded to, tools that enable that through the publisher's platform, through outbound channels, email, social, and so on. But we need more ways to continuously interact with researchers throughout their cycle. So really understanding how are they interacting with your journal, not just on your platform, but across the ecosystem. The different ways in which they're discovering content, in which they're making connections. And there's a whole host of ways that we can do that through different external platforms, social, in events, and so on. At ResearchGate, we've really tried to take this idea, this understanding of the researcher interacting throughout a whole research cycle, and build a way in which the journal can then stay top of mind across those interactions. We know that researchers come to articles individually. They're looking for an article, they come, and then they move on to another article. And across publisher sites, that creates a difficulty. They drop off, you lose them, you don't understand where they've gone beyond that journey, but they're still within their research cycle. They're still interacting, they're still developing their approach. And so platforms where researchers are interacting across multiple different publishers and journals and at different stages of their research cycle can really help us to understand what stages they're at, as Sarah said, when we should engage with them, what kinds of messaging would be useful in doing that. And if we can get that into those platforms where they actually are, then we can really help them understand the ways that they're continuously engaging with a journal, and help them decide and understand when those are the right journals to author with.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, we're on to our third topic before we turn it over to you all for your questions. This is a fairly big topic with a very short time span. So you've all touched on it a little bit, but how are teams adapting in terms of skill sets, and what is your advice to the audience on that? I'm going to Sarah first.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. It's because we've been kind of evolving our team over the last couple of years, really. But really, I think the key change is that mindset change, really, and not just necessarily across your teams, but across the organisation. It's, what does marketing mean in the organisation? So we've been on a really fascinating journey where we've been evolving the team, but equally kind of educating upwards and educating downwards. So trying to explain the role of marketing is not just about the campaign side, but it really is about everything now, from kind of really understanding your customers and your authors, right the way through to understanding the technology that's out there, and then how to apply it in the right way so that you can actually achieve the objectives. So really, for me, I think the core principles of marketing, they just haven't changed. Your customer should always be at the heart of everything that you do, and understanding their pain points, their challenges, and what they're really looking for from you should be absolutely core to what a marketer does. And then sort of creating that right message and using the right channels in the most appropriate way to reach them. But I think really now what we're seeing is that the new skills required within marketing are changing. So I talked about data analysis as well. Certainly in the IT, data analysis sat somewhere else previously. Then it became part of the marketing function, and we've been really looking at that and interrogating that and saying, right, this is what we know, this is what we don't know, and how can we kind of look to try and plug some of those gaps. So that's been fascinating. But equally, it's kind of bringing in those sort of skill sets or centres of excellence, really, to try and kind of leverage everything across, whether it is digital marketing right the way out to the technology that we might be looking at, and then trying to kind of take those insights and what that's telling us and helping your marketers understand how to apply those insights, and stop going from, okay, we want to do this and we're just going to come up with that, but actually really understand what drives that behaviour in the first place, and then using that as a way to kind of improve your messaging. And I think really that's been the biggest change I've seen, and then using that as a way to assess the impact that you've had, and therefore the kind of the contribution that you're making to the organisation has been the kind of key learning for us, certainly.
Thank you. Matt?
Yeah, I think that the mindset shift is an important piece. It's required an understanding of different ways of working. But I think the extension to that is breaking down the silos between the different teams within a publisher, making sure that the publishing team and the marketing team, the editorial team, the insights team are working cohesively and collaboratively to build strategy around developing journals, but then also the understanding of the researcher, and that feeds through all of the teams, not singularly working as as stages, but really as a group to understand how to engage and where to engage.
Thank you. Rachel?
So 10 years ago, we had Facebook, we had social media. Some platforms were in their infancy. We knew there was a digital skills gap at that point, and we knew that there was going to be a need for, creative minds, those who create these powerful narratives and so on, to start thinking more technically, start thinking more data analysts and so on. And I think we've risen to the challenge largely. There's definite, if you think of the marketing colleagues in my team, you have to have a sense of curiosity. And with that, you want to see how your campaigns are performing. You want to see what works well, what didn't work so well. How do we scale things up? Where are we putting our budgets, etc. So I think we've got there, but digital innovations change so quickly. I don't think we can rest on our laurels. We've got to be thinking, what's next? How do we make sure that those creative minds are still thinking about the data and working with the tech teams, as Matt and Sarah both mentioned? They're not, historically, they've not been a natural partnership, very different sort of ways of thinking about things. But we've got to keep sort of a focus on that in terms of how do we continue to work well together and be bringing those skills in. And I think it's about keeping up with pace.
Well, thank you for all the thoughts so far. I'm now going to open it up for questions. Stephanie, are there any questions online? Nothing online. Would anybody have a question in the room yet? Is there a mic?
Hello, I'm Sophia Anderton from BJU International. Really interesting talk, thank you very much. Lots of what you're talking about is talking about teams that have whole marketing teams and different teams within the marketing teams. We have 2 people working in publishing journals. What advice would you give to societies, organisations with very small or zero marketing teams, and how can we market effectively and do all the things that you've described?
Yeah. Who'd like to start?
Yeah.
I'm going to push it to Matt first, because obviously
Yeah.
you work with a lot of different types of organisations.
That is true. I think finding ways to make whatever marketing approaches you are taking scalable. Things that you can replicate, things that you can run without having a requirement for a lot of high touches. There's not a huge amount of routes to do that in the market at the moment. We have, there are channels, but they all require management. I think if we can find ways in which to continuously present your journals without needing that management, that's going to be the best approach. But I'm afraid I don't have a really simple answer for it, because you still need the resource to be able to drive that visibility.
Any other thoughts?
I think I'm stating the obvious, but you know your journals better than anybody else, and even if there's just 2 people within the department, you know what your customers want, you know what the benefits are, you know the USPs, you know all of that. So I would sort of advise that's the thing you need to be pushing and trying to work out, keep that message consistent, make sure that message is resonating with your author group. If it is, then you don't need hundreds of people. It's about making sure that what you're saying to them resonates with them, and again, sort of understanding how they're publishing. And I guess you can derive that from the insights that you're collecting. Yeah, it's a tough one, I know.
Yeah.
I think those channels that are not necessarily marketing channels, so the points at which your authors are interacting with your editorial teams and with publishing teams, being able to still present the values, the USPs, the reasons why authoring is important in that journal. There are still other routes through there that are more perhaps organic within the journal's natural engagement with authors and researchers.
And I'd say as society publishers and smaller publishers, the one thing we're very good at is being embedded in the scientific community, and don't underestimate the value of, as Sarah said, knowing your customers very well. Which you can lose as you get very large, and so I suppose it's maintaining that and making the most of it. I mean, automation is a wonderful thing. It can go wrong sometimes as well. So I think there is a definite value. It's almost like personalisation, but done very well.
I think there was a question. Oh, I think it might have gone away.
There's a question online, actually.
There's a question online. We'll come to the question online and then here and here.
Sure. So the question online is, for many publishers, they're at arm's length from a lot of the most helpful data because it's locked up in author submission systems, or for societies, held by partner publishers. Could the panel speak to some of the strategies to mitigate this?
So it's extracting that data from the systems and silos.
The point I made earlier about sort of content marketing is quite valuable here in terms of collecting that data where people want to give you that data, and you've got to give something that is valuable to them. And so if you're producing, back to my point about market research, that insight is really valuable, and you can use that for your content, or producing content that helps and guides them through the process. I think that can help, that it's that swap of data, isn't it, in terms of we'll provide this and it's really useful for you.
Mic over here. Thank you.
Hi.
Is mic on? Try again.
Okay. Hi, Laurie Carlin, Delta Think. In terms of using your existing customers to help you market to other customers. Big proponent of that. If you study marketing and advertising, there was a campaign in the United States decades ago that was about, I think, shampoo, where it was, one customer told two friends, and they told two friends, and so on and so on. And there are some obvious ways that you can help your authors help you promote through social media, asking them to post in their articles and their experience and things like that. But are there other concrete ways that you would suggest that you empower and utilize your existing customers to try to incorporate new customers or pass on information to their colleagues?
It's a great question. Would anybody like to take it first?
Yeah, I really think that holistic experience piece is pretty massive there. There's a social element to authoring. When authors are deciding where to publish, they look at, who else do I know that is authoring in those journals? Do I know the editors? Am I citing the journal? Am I reading the journal? And so being able to flag all those points to potential authors is important, and existing authors are a good way of doing that. The point that I made at the start about the focus on returning is that if you can create that experience for somebody who's previously published with you and let them understand how the impact of the research that they've published continues to grow, there are other connections with the journal, the likelihood of them publishing with you again is higher. And authors don't publish with the same author group every time. And so they will naturally then bring in new co-authors. And so in that way, it works like a form of organic network marketing. But you really need to ensure that the experience that they're having across the journal is consistent and is high. It's a difficulty when you ask authors and they come back and say, you ask authors about their experience with the journal, and they come back and tell you about something that happened when they were a reviewer. And you're kind of lost there because you're looking at them as an author. And so being able to understand, but also engage them across those different pieces will organically and naturally grow the journal.
I think we'll take one more question in the room down here.
Thanks, Ian from PLOS. So we've heard an awful lot about the researcher as the customer. To what extent do the strategies, the techniques you're talking about apply to other kinds of customer, like librarians, for example?
Should I take that one?
Oh, please.
Sorry.
No.
Fascinating, because when we moved to Wiley, of course, the author marketing piece was done very much by Wiley. However, the library is a significant part of the ecosystem. So our piece now is not only do we need to understand the author workflow, and therefore how do we support that through all the solutions that we have, but we've also got dual customers. So how do we make sure we understand at what point the library is playing and what role they're playing in supporting the publication decision anyway, but equally they need to be the champions within the institution of the solutions that they have and how they can help authors really achieve. So for us, it's very much a kind of a dual approach. Open access has meant the customer has shifted more towards the individual now. However, the much wider ecosystem is still very much there, and you have to make sure you've got that really kind of in mind as well. So you've almost got B2B and B2C at the same time, and understanding where they all kind of interact within that journey is key. And that's how we've been playing, because our solutions, even though the journals are open access and we index open access content in our databases, other solutions that we have, of course, are paid for. So therefore, we've got to be mindful of that while we're kind of putting that sort of marketing journey together. So that's how we've tried to sort of keep it all in the air, everything kind of together. So yeah, great point, because I was thinking that when I was putting my notes together. It's not just about the author for us, it's about the library too.
Can I just add, because you're absolutely right, librarians are huge advocates of open science and OA, and they have such an influence on faculty and so on, so it's really important that they're communicated to in that way as well.
Yeah, not to harp on the same point, but I think librarians are also very interested and influenced by the experience of the researchers that they're supporting. And so there's a symbiotic relationship there. There's direct engagement with librarians, but the kind of bottom-up grassroots experience and feedback on journals and publishers also influences librarians. So it's not just one directional from the publisher to the librarian, but it's also within the institution and then coming back to the publisher.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions online? Are there? We'll take one more question in the room then. At the back, that gentleman.
Hello, I'm Mark McCallum from Code Mantra, and you've spoken very interestingly about the data and insights that you can generate from the various tools that you use in engagements with the audience. I was interested to know how, or indeed possibly even if, you can use those insights, the trends, the keywords potentially, and feed them back into the publishing process and the metadata that's wrapped around the content you're publishing.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, so you mean essentially taking those understandings of the audience engagement and then using them in the metadata for articles, make them more discoverable?
Exactly.
I mean, there's potential to do that. It depends on the systems that you're using, the capabilities that you have. I think finding the multiple different ways to leverage that user understanding beyond just simply re-engaging or identifying is a rich vein that could be explored. I don't see it happening a massive amount. But and this is what I meant about the silos between the teams. If the marketing team is gathering a load of data about the audiences and the understanding, that then should be understandable within the editorial teams, the publishing teams, because then that also could help with the makeup of editorial, the way that actual content is then disseminated and presented on the publisher's site. And so ensuring that understanding is across all teams shows more and more opportunities to leverage it.
Thank you.
Well, to wrap up, would each of you like to give one final thought on what your top takeaway would be for this audience going away and thinking about small marketing teams, large marketing teams, how to get started? Sarah, if I
go first. I think, not to kind of keep reinforcing the point, but I genuinely think, marketing's always been about the customer. It's always been about understanding their customer needs and the challenges they're experiencing and how you can either develop a solution that overcomes that or how you can message against that. And I think keep that absolutely core. That is not going to change. The tools will change, the processes will change, whether it's a B2B customer like a library or a B2C customer like an author, that might change. But actually the principles of marketing don't. And that for me is really core. It's just understanding how to kind of use everything that's now available to you to deliver against the objectives that you want to achieve. And that's the takeaway I've had.
Thank you. Matt?
Yeah, for me, really developing that individual understanding of the researcher as much as possible, and then engaging them where they are and where they are in their research cycle, I think is key, especially in the transition to open access.
Thank you. Rachel?
Going back to the point I made earlier about the quality of your data, that really helps to understand who you're communicating with and who you're marketing to, and helps you with business decisions and strategies. So no matter what the size of the publisher, I think that's the really important element, is to go back and ensure that it's consistent and of a high quality.
Thank you. I think you've offered a lot of food for thought this morning. I would like everyone to thank our panel, and then I have to introduce Alison to say a few words.